I got one for you here. Name one forward and one defenseman in training camp that you were most interested in watching and seeing how their role for the upcoming season kind of unfolds.
Ryan Johnson. Like, for me, it's got to be Ryan
Really?
Johnson because, again, you and I said that he should have been in the NHL last year. And now they bring back guys like Bryson. We heard them that they were in the conversation for Mark Giordano for some weird reason. I really hope I really hope that was not a real thing, because why on earth would you bring in Mark Giordano when you've already got, a stopgap guy on your defensive core ready to move out maybe in this season or the next offseason in Henry Jokiharju? Why you would bring in a guy like Mark Giordano, I have no idea, especially when you're trying to bring up a guy like Ryan Johnson. It just makes no sense. We don't want another Eric Johnson situation where they bring in a veteran and they just put him in the lineup because they feel like they need to, as a guy that's been in the league a long time. So I'm glad they did not go in the Mark Giordano route. And that was that's long gone. But to me, Ryan Johnson, because I want to know, is he going to be a 5'6" defenseman on this team? Is he going to be the number 1 D in Rochester? We know he's talented enough to play at this level, but is Lindy Ruff going to give him an opportunity to really showcase that he could be a quality NHL defenseman on a full-time basis?
I like that. I got two. So for forwards, I'm going to go McLeod. I think Ryan McLeod is probably the most interesting name for a lot of Sabres fans, because not only was he part of that Savoy trade, but he is penciled in that third line center replacing Casey Middlestat. Again, a completely different player, a speed two-way guy that we've kind of said that they need. So I'm very interested to see the role that they envision for him. Is it, third line center at 5-on-5? Is it PK1? Is it power play 2? Very interested to see how Lindy Ruff uses him and how he fits in and who his line mates are. On defense, I'm most intrigued by Bowen Byram, right? Aside from McLeod, Eichel trade, ignore the Eichel trade, but aside from McLeod, probably Kevin Adams' biggest swing. Actually, I don't even think it's much of an argument. He's probably a bigger swing than, I don't know. You might look at it either way, but those are his two big swings, McLeod and Byram. How does Bowen Byram fit in a Lindy Ruff system? Is it going to be, Byram and Dahlin? Is it going to be Power and Dahlin? Is he going to, go, Dahlin, Power, Byram on all three on a different pair? Where does Byram fit in on the special teams? What role do they envision for Bowen Byram? Because you traded Casey Middlestat for him, envisioning him in a Don Granato system. Well, the Don Granato system's not here anymore. Now he's in a Lindy Ruff system. He's a guy who has a contract that needs to be, signed soon, as do a lot of other guys that we've mentioned so far today. So how is Lindy Ruff going to use him, and how is he going to work in Lindy Ruff's system? Because if Bowen Byram works out and improves in this Lindy Ruff system, that trade looks a lot better. So those are the two names that I'm really interested in. I know it's probably a little bit of a cop-out because those are obviously two guys that are for sure on this team no matter what, but to me, that's why they're the most intriguing. How is McLeod going to be used, and what does Bowen Byram look like? To me, those are the two biggest storylines, because if those two guys take steps forward and have really good years, those two guys could be some of the biggest keys for getting this team over the hump and potentially into the playoffs.
I like that, and my honorable mention is Komarov, because, again, I expect him to be in Rochester, but I want to see how he does at this level at training camp. A guy that was a defenseman of the year in the QMJHL. Again, I fully expect him to be in Rochester this year, but I really want to see what he kind of brings, the type of dynamic he's going to bring. He's got some fellow Russian-speaking players to kind of make that transition easier for him. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in his first year of pros down there with Rochester. But the other one that I want to touch on here, Austin, is the goaltending, because obviously they bring in Ratzlaff and Leenders as guys that are most likely not going to make the team right away, the two youngest goaltenders that they have at this camp. You brought in James Reimer in the offseason. What is going to be the plan for Devin Levi? You heard Lindy Ruff say at his press conference, we got 3 words for our goaltending, UPL. So they must envision Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is going to play 60 or so games this year, going to get the bulk of the starts. But then after that, are we going to have another situation here where Reimer is the Eric Comrie as the backup goaltender, but then misses out on starts because they'll just call Levi up from Rochester as the starter to make spot starts here and there for the Sabres as the backup? I really don't want to go through that 3 goalie rotation thing again. Again, I know Reimer could clear waivers and end up going down to Rochester and start for them, but they also got Sandstrom down there as well that could kind of start for Rochester, give them some stability if Levi and or Levi end up getting called up to Buffalo, whichever one isn't the backup. But to me, it's just going to be what percentage of the starts is Luukkonen going to get? Because you'd assume if they play 4 games in a week, he's getting 3. If they play 3 games, he's getting 2 of the 3. Might not get a back-to-back here and there. But for me, it's how much is Luukkonen going to play, and what is their plan for Levi? Is he going to be the full-time backup, or is he going to be the full-time starter in Rochester?
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know if that's something, again, I don't think that's a situation that's going to get resolved at a training camp because, again, like as weird as it sounds, I think I don't know what the rules are with them going to Europe, but I'm going to imagine their opening day roster has 3 goalies because they're clearly taking Reimer, Levi, and Luukkonen over to Europe.
There's going to be a taxi squad for sure.
Yeah, so like I think, but going forward after that, yeah, like you gave Reimer a 1 year deal, was $1 million. So if you got to send him down to Rochester, that's fine. To me, their situation with Luukkonen depends on who the backup is. Because if Levi's the backup, to me, it's okay. You probably want a 55-27 split. But if Reimer's the backup, maybe you're comfortable throwing Luukkonen out there a lot more often. I don't know. It's going to be like you said, it's going to be a weird situation. To me, I was talking to a buddy at work today, actually, and I said, how realistic do you think that Levi starts in Rochester? And he's like, I think it's really realistic. And I was like, damn, because I wasn't so sure. But if James Reimer's your backup, like we've seen him do it in this league, he's a quality backup goalie. So I think they kind of set themselves up nicely with that goalie depth. I am very curious how much of a battle it actually is, because in my brain, to me, it was just, it's Levi and Luukkonen. But Luukkonen's obviously the starter. I guess as the season approaches, I'm starting to doubt that a little bit more. But I think it would take like a disastrous preseason by Levi for him not to be the backup goalie on this team from day one, in my opinion.
Now, the other thing that I've been thinking about is, you don't want them to get into a situation where this is like a Yaroslav Askarov situation in Nashville, where they sign Saros, they know he's going to be the starter, and Askarov says, I don't want to be in the AHL anymore. I want to start. I'm going to request a trade. If Levi ends up getting sent down to Rochester to start the season, at what point does he say, I'm good enough to be an NHL goaltender, and then he goes and requests a trade out of Buffalo? Like, is that a scenario where it could get that way, or do you think that Levi, in the situation that he's still in, could still go down to Rochester and be okay with that for another season, knowing that UPL is the starting goaltender and they've signed him to an extension?
See, that's in my brain and the way I've worked out the situation. To me, there's no issue with that at all, because to me, the only way Levi is not an NHL goalie, again, not the starter. It's very clear that Luukkonen is the starter this year. But to me, the only way Levi is not an NHL goalie to start this season is if he tanks preseason. To me, if Levi has a good preseason, he's your backup goalie. You're only paying Reimer $1 million. He's got to go through waivers. Someone might claim him anyway. That's not a really bad, like, to me, you giving Reimer a 1 year deal for $1 million wasn't, oh my God, this guy has to be our backup goalie this year. So to me, it was an insurance policy in case Levi kind of blows it in the preseason. Like, how many times did Luukkonen have a chance in preseason to win the job only to struggle? Remember, was it Anderson and Dell were our goalies the 1 year? Like, we literally assumed it was going to be Luukkonen's job, and he played so poorly in the preseason that he went down. To me, that's the only way Levi's not a Sabre to start the season. So in my brain, no, there's no issue with Levi going down to Rochester and demanding a trade, because if he goes down to Rochester, it's because he played.
That's
Askarov
true.
demanded a trade because they signed Saros to a massive deal while Askarov was playing well. Now, if Levi's playing really well and is stuck in Rochester, maybe that's an issue, but I don't see a scenario where Levi plays really well in the preseason and doesn't get first crack at the backup job this year.
Yeah, and
Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I hope you're right, to be honest. I don't want to get into that type of situation, but again, it is something that we've seen with another highly touted goaltender that has not been given an opportunity at the NHL level. So we'll see what kind of happens as training camp progresses there with the two goalies, again, barring hopefully no injuries and anything like that.